Empires do not collapse in a single dramatic moment. They do not always fall because armies are defeated or cities are burned. Most of the time, they die slowly, quietly, and from the inside. Long before the walls are breached and the legions disappear, something more important breaks first: trust. History loves to show us the final scenes: collapsing legions, assassinated emperors, or marble palaces filled with poison and betrayal. But these are only symptoms, not causes. The real destruction begins much earlier, hidden deep inside the financial system of the empire itself. When money stops being honest, everything built on top of it begins to rot. Rome is the greatest example of this truth. The Roman Empire did not fall simply because of invasions or corruption. It fell because its currency collapsed. The coin that once represented Roman strength, stability, and discipline slowly lost its value. And with it, the faith of the people. This was not a sudden disaster. It was a long, deliberate process, and most Romans did not realize what was happening until it was too late. Money is not just metal or paper. It is trust made visible. It is a promise that today's work will still have value tomorrow. When that promise is broken, society itself begins to unravel. Contracts lose meaning. Trade slows. Wages fail to keep up with prices. People work harder but become poorer. The most dangerous part of monetary collapse is that it often looks harmless at first. Coins still shine. Bills still circulate. Governments insist everything is under control. But beneath the surface, real value is being drained away, piece by piece, year after year. Rome believed it could manipulate its money without consequences. It believed that reducing the value of its currency was easier than facing hard choices. That decision did not just weaken the economy, it hollowed out the empire itself. And here is the warning that makes this story matter today. Rome was not unique. The method that destroyed its currency has been repeated again and again throughout history. The names change, the technology changes, but the outcome never does. To understand how great powers truly fall, we must begin not with swords or invasions, but with money. For centuries, the strength of Rome was not measured only by its armies or its territory, but by the reliability of its money. At the center of the Roman economy stood a single silver coin, the denarius, first minted around 211 before Christ. The denarius became one of the most trusted forms of money in the ancient world. This coin was not trusted because of laws or threats. It was trusted because it contained real value. In its early form, the denarius was made of nearly pure silver. Anyone who held it knew exactly what it was worth. Roman soldiers accepted it as pay. Merchants demanded it in trade. Ordinary families saved it for the future. Across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, the denarius was recognized as honest money. The power of Rome and the value of the denarius were deeply connected. As Rome expanded, so did confidence in its currency. When Roman authority was strong, trade flourished. Roads, ports, and markets linked distant regions together, all using the same trusted coin. This created one of the most advanced economic systems the world had ever seen. Roman soldiers were a key part of this system. They were paid in denarii, and their loyalty depended on the coin maintaining its value. A soldier who trusted his pay trusted the empire that issued it. In this way, money helped hold the empire together, just as much as military discipline did. For ordinary people, the denarius represented security. It allowed farmers to sell their crops, craftsmen to price their work, and families to plan for the future. Savings made sense because the coin held its value over time. Wealth was stored in metal, not promises. Under Emperor Augustus, who ruled at the beginning of the empire, the denarius contained about 95% silver. This consistency sent a clear message. Rome stood behind its money. As long as the empire maintained this standard, confidence remained high. But this stability carried a hidden risk. Rome's entire system depended on continued trust. If that trust were ever broken, the damage would spread far beyond markets and prices. Few Romans understood how fragile this arrangement truly was. The denarius was more than a coin. It was the foundation of Roman economic life. And when that foundation began to crack, the entire structure of the empire would eventually follow. The effects of currency debasement do not stay hidden for long. Once money loses real value, prices begin to rise. This is inflation, and for ordinary people, it feels like a slow theft. The same amount of work produces less and less in return. In Rome, people could see and feel the difference in their coins. The denarius no longer had the weight or shine it once did. Merchants noticed first. They began charging higher prices to protect themselves from loss. A measure of wheat that once cost a single denarius soon required many more. What looked like rising prices was actually falling money. For soldiers, inflation was especially dangerous. Their pay was fixed, but the cost of living was not. As food and supplies became more expensive, soldiers demanded higher wages. To keep the army loyal, emperors paid them more, using even more debased coins. This only made the problem worse. Merchants started to lose faith in the currency. Many refused to accept the new coins, especially for large transactions. Some demanded payment in gold. Others turned to barter, exchanging goods directly rather than trusting money that no longer held value. Trade became slower, harder, and more local. Ordinary families suffered the most. Savings lost purchasing power. Years of careful planning disappeared as prices rose faster than wages. People worked longer hours, yet found themselves poorer than before. The idea of saving for the future stopped making sense when money could not hold its value. As trust eroded, the Roman economy began to break apart. Markets shrank. Long-distance trade declined. Local economies became isolated. The empire still looked powerful from the outside, but inside, the economic system was cracking. The government responded in the worst possible way. Instead of restoring the value of money, it produced even more coins. The hope was that volume would replace value. It never does. More money chasing the same goods only accelerates inflation. This created a vicious cycle. Debasement led to inflation. Inflation led to higher costs. Higher costs led to more debasement. Each step weakened trust further. What Rome was experiencing was not just an economic problem, it was a social one. When money fails, cooperation fails. When cooperation fails, society begins to fracture. The collapse was no longer theoretical. It had entered the kitchens, markets, and daily lives of ordinary Romans. Have you ever wondered if a superpower could just fall apart? Not from one big battle, but by slowly crumbling from the inside out. That's exactly what happened to the Roman Empire during the crisis of the 3rd century. It was a 50-year period so chaotic, so disastrous, that Rome almost didn't make it out alive. Imagine this. In just 50 years, Rome had over 26 emperors. And guess what? Almost all of them were assassinated or killed in battle. They were called the barracks emperors because they were generals who seized power only to be overthrown by the next ambitious general. The political scene was a deadly Game of Thrones, and the whole empire was the chessboard. But the chaos didn't stop there. The economy was in freefall. To pay the soldiers who kept them in power, emperors started debasing the currency. They mixed cheap metals like copper and tin into silver coins. At the start of the century, a coin was almost pure silver. By the end, it was less than 5% silver. This created hyperinflation. Prices skyrocketed, savings became worthless, and trade ground to a halt. People went back to bartering trading goods directly because money had lost its value. While the politicians and generals were fighting, the borders were left wide open. Barbarian tribes like the Goths, Franks, and Alemanni saw their chance and poured into Roman territory, raiding and pillaging. At the same time, the powerful Sassanid Empire in the east launched massive invasions, even capturing a Roman Emperor Valerian, a humiliation Rome had never experienced before. The empire actually splintered. The Gallic Empire broke away in the west, and the Palmyrene Empire formed in the east, under the legendary Queen Zenobia. For a while, it looked like the Roman Empire was finished, split into 3 warring states. On top of all this, a devastating plague, likely smallpox, swept through the empire, killing millions. Cities emptied out, farms were abandoned, and the social fabric of Roman life was torn to shreds. So how did Rome survive this perfect storm of political instability, economic collapse, and foreign invasion? It was thanks to a series of tough, determined emperors, like Aurelian, who was nicknamed Restorer of the World. He reunited the fractured empire through sheer military force and began the long, hard process of rebuilding. The crisis of the 3rd century was a brutal near-death experience for Rome. It fundamentally changed the empire, paving the way for the reforms of Diocletian and the eventual rise of the Byzantine Empire in the east. It's a powerful reminder that even the mightiest empires can be brought to their knees by internal decay. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into Roman history interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the ancient world. See you next time. As the Roman Empire staggered through the crisis of the 3rd century, emperors searched desperately for solutions. One of the most ambitious attempts came from Emperor Diocletian, who ruled from 284 to 305 after Christ. He understood that the empire's core problem was financial. The currency had been debased so much that coins no longer held real value. But his solution would reveal the limits of imperial power against economic reality. In 301 after Christ, Diocletian issued the famous edict on maximum prices. It was an attempt to control inflation by setting fixed prices for over 1,000 goods and services: grain, wine, oil, wages, even transportation fees. Violators faced severe punishment, in some cases, death. The emperor believed that by forcing prices to remain stable, he could stop the economic chaos. In theory, the plan seemed reasonable, but in practice, it failed spectacularly. Prices could not be controlled by decree when the money itself had been hollowed out. A coin no longer backed by silver or trust could not be made to suddenly hold value. Merchants ignored the edict, selling goods at higher prices to survive. Black markets flourished. Bartering increased as people refused to use the officially mandated currency. Worse, enforcement was nearly impossible. The empire was vast, and the government could not monitor every town, farm, or market. Local officials often took bribes or simply ignored the rules. The edict quickly became a symbol of desperation rather than authority. Citizens saw that the state could no longer guarantee economic stability. The lesson was clear: laws cannot fix broken money. Stability in an economy depends on trust and intrinsic value, not commands. Diocletian tried to impose control from above, but the decay had already spread too far. The empire had learned at immense cost that monetary collapse cannot be corrected by decree or punishment alone. Even Diocletian's later reforms, which included restructuring taxes and introducing new coins, only provided temporary relief. The underlying problem remained. The denarius was gone. Trust in money was shattered, and the empire's financial core was hollowed out. The failure of Diocletian's edict was more than a historical footnote. It became a timeless lesson for governments everywhere. Manipulating or controlling money without restoring its real value will never succeed. People may obey laws, but they cannot be forced to trust a coin that has already betrayed them. After decades of economic chaos, Rome began to search for a more permanent solution. The denarius had failed. Its debasement had hollowed out the empire's economic core. By the early 4th century, the Western Empire was fragile, its armies underfunded, trade disrupted, and trust in government broken. Rome needed more than temporary fixes. It needed money that could be trusted again. Enter Constantine the Great, who ruled from 306 to 337 after Christ. Around 312, he introduced a new coin, the solidus, made of nearly pure gold. Unlike the denarius, the solidus maintained a consistent value over time. It was heavier, rarer, and backed by tangible gold, which instantly restored some measure of confidence in the empire's economy. The introduction of the solidus brought stability, but only partially. By this point, the Western Roman Empire had already been weakened for decades. Armies struggled to defend borders, trade networks were fractured. Local economies, once linked by denarii, had turned inward to survive. The damage from centuries of inflation and debasement could not be undone overnight. The Eastern Empire, which would later become known as the Byzantine Empire, benefited greatly from the solidus. For centuries, it maintained relative economic stability thanks to the gold-backed currency. Meanwhile, the West continued to struggle. Rome's decline was no longer solely a political or military issue. It had become an economic and social one. The empire had been split, and its two halves followed different financial fates. The story of the solidus demonstrates an important truth. Restoring confidence in money can stabilize an economy, but it cannot erase decades of mismanagement. Trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to fully recover. A single reform can stop further decay, but it cannot rebuild what has already been destroyed. The lessons of the solidus are clear for all times. Wealth and stability rely on real value. Paper promises, cheap coins, or manipulated money cannot replace trust. When rulers fail to respect this principle, they endanger not only the economy, but the entire empire. Rome's story is more than history, it is a warning. The collapse of the denarius did not happen by accident. It followed a pattern that has repeated across centuries and continents. Whenever governments debase money or manipulate currency to cover their expenses, ordinary people pay the price, and trust evaporates. The pattern begins quietly. Leaders face financial pressure, wars, debts, or public spending. Raising taxes is unpopular, and cutting spending is politically dangerous. So, they turn to a hidden solution, increasing the money supply or reducing its real value. Coins or paper money look the same, but they contain less real wealth. The effect is slow at first, almost invisible. Then comes inflation. Prices rise, wages lag behind, and savings lose value. People may notice small changes at first, but the erosion of purchasing power accelerates. Merchants, traders, and citizens begin to lose confidence in the currency. Bartering returns. Markets shrink. Trust, the most fragile pillar of any economy, begins to collapse. As the system unravels, governments often respond with temporary measures, price controls, forced labor, or heavier taxes. But these do not address the core problem. The currency itself has been weakened, and laws cannot restore trust in something that has been fundamentally devalued. Rome's experience set a blueprint that has been repeated again and again. Governments debase money to cover costs. Elites protect themselves with real assets like land, gold, or foreign currency. Ordinary citizens are left exposed, struggling to survive as their money loses value. This pattern is not ancient history. It has appeared in Germany, Zimbabwe, and even modern economies. The mechanics remain the same, and the consequences are predictable. Monetary collapse destroys wealth, weakens governments, and disrupts societies. Understanding this pattern is essential. Money is not just a tool for trade. It is the backbone of trust and cooperation. When it fails, everything built on it begins to fail as well. Rome teaches us that empires do not fall overnight. They crumble quietly inside the vaults and treasuries, long before the armies are defeated. The pattern of monetary collapse is not confined to ancient Rome or post-war Europe. It can happen anywhere, at any time. When governments attempt to cover shortfalls with worthless money, one of the most dramatic examples in modern history occurred in Zimbabwe during the early 2000s. Facing economic decline, land seizures, and falling agricultural production, the Zimbabwean government turned to massive money printing. They believed that issuing more currency could cover debts and sustain the state, but the effect was catastrophic. The currency lost value almost overnight. By 2008, Zimbabwe experienced hyperinflation on a scale that defies comprehension. Prices doubled daily. The annual inflation rate reached 89.76 trillion%, a number so large it is nearly impossible to imagine. Shops could not update prices fast enough. Ordinary citizens could not buy basic goods. Money, once a medium of exchange, became worthless. The economy reverted almost entirely to barter, foreign currency, and informal trade. As in Rome, elites who held real assets, land, foreign currency, or businesses survived, or even prospered. Ordinary citizens, reliant on wages or savings, were devastated. Trust in the government vanished. Social structures fractured. Communities struggled to meet basic needs. Hyperinflation did not just destroy money, it destroyed confidence, society, and stability. Zimbabwe's crisis serves as a warning that financial mismanagement is universal. It does not matter whether the currency is silver coins, paper money, or digital balances. If value is eroded artificially, the results are always the same. Ordinary people pay the heaviest price while those with assets shield themselves. History has repeated this lesson over thousands of years. Rome, Germany, and Zimbabwe all show the same truth. When governments cheat the system of money, the consequences are devastating and inevitable. History does not repeat exactly, but it always rhymes. Rome's collapse, Germany's hyperinflation, and Zimbabwe's monetary disaster all follow the same pattern. Governments manipulate or debase money. Ordinary people suffer, and trust in society erodes. The barbarians at the gate may finish the job, but the real destruction begins in the treasury, long before armies march. The story of money is the story of civilization itself. When currency is stable, societies flourish. Trade thrives, armies are funded, and citizens can plan for the future. When currency fails, Even the strongest empires crumble. Contracts break down, markets shrink, governments lose legitimacy, and ordinary people are left to pay the price. Today, the stakes are higher than ever. The world runs on fiat currencies, massive debts, and global financial systems interconnected like never before. The potential for collapse is not regional or national, it is global. Yet the lesson remains unchanged. Trust in money is fragile, and when it is abused, society begins to unravel. For you, the lesson is clear. Knowledge is power, and preparation is survival. Study history. Understand the forces that destroy wealth. Protect yourself with real assets, skills, and diversified resources. Recognize that governments may manipulate money and that inflation is often intentional. The coins, the bills, the digital balances you hold may look the same tomorrow, but their value is never guaranteed. Rome fell not because of invaders alone, it fell because its money betrayed its people. The same could happen again, anywhere in the world, to anyone unprepared. But those who understand the patterns, who value real wealth, and who act before the collapse, can not only survive, they can thrive. Remember this, history is not just a record of the past, it is a guide. Ignore it, and it will crush you. Study it, and it will protect you. The Roman currency crisis was not simply about emperors or coins. It was about the fragility of trust, the power of money, and the unchanging rules of financial reality. Your wealth, security, and future depend on whether you see this truth in time and whether you act before history repeats itself.